Elon just launched a bank paying 6% interest. Surgeons watched a brain implant get inserted through a membrane that normally requires a scalpel, and underground tunnels in Las Vegas are now being driven by Tesla's own self-driving software. Most media outlets covered these as three unrelated stories. Looked at together, though, they start to resemble something else entirely. Three separate organs of a single machine, with Tesla positioned as the company that turns all of it into physical hardware. Each piece stands on its own as a genuinely significant development. X Money launched inside the X platform with real FDIC coverage. Neuralink threaded electrode implants directly through the brain's protective membrane in a live human trial. And the Boring Company is now actively tunneling in three separate cities with Tesla's driving software already operating vehicles underneath Las Vegas. Here's how we'll break this down. First, what X Money actually offers, because the feature list itself hints at the broader strategy. Then, why that 6% rate functions as a magnet, and what a Musk-owned payment system could eventually mean for robotaxi economics. After that, the Neuralink breakthrough explains simply the potential bridge to Optimus, and what's genuinely happening underground in Las Vegas. Finally, an honest assessment of what all this actually means for Tesla stock, and just as importantly, what it doesn't. X Money, a bank living inside a social app. X Money went live on June 26th for Premium and Premium Plus subscribers in the US, following months of closed beta testing. This is the feature Musk has referenced since the day he acquired Twitter, the payments layer of his long-promised everything app, and it's now genuinely operational. Real accounts, real cards, real balances, with a broader rollout planned. The feature list itself is worth walking through slowly, because on first read, it's genuinely hard to believe. Every dollar deposited earns 6% annual interest, with no cap and no minimum balance requirement. Deposits are FDIC and SURED up to $10 million, far beyond the standard $250,000 coverage most bank accounts carry. Card purchases earn uncapped 3% cashback on a physical metal Visa card that works everywhere Visa is accepted and integrates with Apple Pay. Wire transfers, bill payments, and check deposits are free. ATM withdrawals are free, including reimbursement for out-of-network fees. Direct deposit arrives up to 2 days early, and peer-to-peer payments between X users settle instantly. That's essentially a full-featured bank operating inside a social media app. There are some exclusions on the cashback program, jewelry, bedding, precious metals, but the headline features are exactly as advertised. The account limits reveal exactly who this product was built for. There's no cap on transfers to X itself. Wire transfers cap at $75,000 daily and $250,000 per month. Card purchases cap at $25,000 per day. Those aren't casual consumer numbers. They're small business and high net worth figures. Nobody designs a tip jar with a $75,000 daily wire limit. This system was built from day one to handle serious money. Musk described the underlying goal months ago, stating the intention was to make this the central hub for all monetary transactions, calling it a genuine game changer. That framing matters for everything that follows. Why 6% is bait, not charity. The 6% rate only makes sense once you compare it against the current banking landscape. The average US savings account currently pays under 1%. Even the best high-yield accounts hover around 4%, and many of those cap balances or reduce rates after an introductory period. X Money pays 6% across the board, uncapped, with no hoops to jump through. The insurance structure is equally unusual. A standard bank account carries FDIC coverage up to $250,000. X Money spreads deposits across multiple partner banks behind the scenes, stacking coverage up to $10 million. For someone with a genuine reason to care, a creator who just received a large payout, a small business managing payroll, a family that just sold a house. That's a meaningful reason to consolidate funds in one place. Is this sustainable long-term? Almost certainly not at this exact rate forever. Rates this generous are typically subsidized, specifically to attract deposits quickly. There's historical precedent here. PayPal famously paid new users $20 just to open an account back in 1999, a land grab strategy that helped build a company eventually worth tens of billions. This looks like the same playbook at a much larger scale. The yield is the hook, and the deposits are the actual prize, because once your balance lives inside the app, spending it becomes frictionless. Your paycheck lands there, creator revenue lands there. Reaching for an old debit card starts to feel unnecessary, especially with 3% cashback pulling in the same direction. Whoever holds the balance effectively owns the transaction, which is essentially the lesson from WeChat in China, where a single app absorbed daily payments for over 1 billion people, starting the same way, with money simply sitting in the app for unrelated reasons first. Watch the creator economy angle specifically. X already pays creators directly, and those payouts now default into X money. A creator earning 6% on their balance while spending through the 3% cashback card has essentially no remaining reason to interact with a traditional bank at all. Connecting X money to Tesla, speculatively. Important caveat before going further. None of this has been officially announced. Neither Tesla nor SpaceX has said anything publicly connecting these systems. This section is genuine speculation based on how the pieces fit together. Start with how robotaxi rides currently get paid for. The app accepts Apple Pay and Google Pay, both added this spring, convenient for riders, but it also means roughly 2 to 3% of every fare leaks out to Apple, Google, and card processing networks. At current volumes, that's a rounding error. But at the scale robotaxi is actually targeting, millions of rides daily, that leak becomes real money. If robotaxi ever generates $10 billion annually in fares, a 2.5% processing leak works out to $250 million a year, indefinitely. Owning the payment rail internally keeps that margin inside the family of companies. It gets more interesting from there. Tesla has discussed for years letting individual owners add their personal vehicles to the robotaxi fleet, essentially an Airbnb model for cars. When that happens, the natural place for those earnings to land is an account that settles instantly and earns interest immediately. A ride finishing at 2 a.m. means money compounding in your account at 2 a.m. Then there's the vehicle itself. A conventional car doesn't spend money independently, but an autonomous vehicle potentially does. Charging, parking, tolls, car washes. A machine handling its own transactions needs a payment method that doesn't require a human tapping a phone. That's fundamentally a digital wallet problem, and Musk now controls a wallet infrastructure, one that could plausibly extend to Optimus robots as well. A robot running errands needs some way to pay for groceries. The same logic extends to SpaceX through Starlink, millions of monthly subscriptions currently paying card processing fees. Longer term, Starlink reaches people who own a phone but lack traditional banking access. Combine X money with Starlink connectivity, and you get a plausible path toward banking services for the unbanked, a population numbering in the billions globally. None of this exists yet in practice. The signal to watch for is X money appearing as a payment option inside the actual robotaxi app. That would be the clearest indication these systems are genuinely connecting. Neuralink's breakthrough, explained simply. On June 30th, Neuralink posted an update that got largely overshadowed by the X money news, but on a longer timeline, it may prove to be the more significant development. The company's own description: the dura mater is the brain's protective membrane, tough enough that surgeons normally need a scalpel to cut through it. For the first time in their clinical trials, Neuralink inserted electrode threads directly through the dura and into the brain's cortex, while leaving the membrane itself intact. In plain terms, the dura is a leathery protective layer wrapped around the brain, and the standard surgical approach requires cutting it open. That incision is a major source of surgical risk, recovery time, and infection risk in traditional brain surgery. Neuralink managed to thread its electrodes straight through this membrane without cutting it at all, leaving it sealed. The physical scale involved is remarkable. The electrode threads are thinner than a human hair, while the dura itself can be more than 10 times thicker than the thread passing through it. The brain beneath is also in constant motion, and the membrane obscures the exact position of blood vessels that need to be avoided. Neuralink threaded a hair-width implant through moving tissue, partially blind to the vasculature underneath, in a live human patient, and it worked. Musk's reaction called this a solved problem for through-dura electrode implantation, describing it as significantly improving both the safety and ease of interfacing with the brain. Context matters here too. Neuralink has 21 implanted patients as of January. Individuals with spinal cord injuries and ALS who are controlling cursors, playing chess, and posting on social media purely through thought. The first patient has now lived with the implant for over 2 years. The FDA has also granted Neuralink breakthrough device status, specifically for speech restoration applications, indicating regulators are actively engaging with the technology's most significant potential uses. The company's stated goal for this year involves high-volume device production with a largely automated surgical procedure, a Musk-stated target that should be treated with appropriate skepticism given his historical timeline optimism. Still, keeping the dura intact genuinely simplifies the procedure, makes it measurably safer, and makes it far more feasible for a surgical robot to perform at scale. The core question has shifted from whether the implant functions, which 2 years of patient data already answers, to whether the procedure can become routine, and routine is typically the point where technology actually reshapes the world. The Tesla Neuralink bridge. There's already a public connection point here. A Neuralink patient has controlled a robotic arm purely through thought, and when Neuralink's head of surgery was asked directly about connecting the implant to Tesla's Optimus robot, the response was that they're starting with simpler applications, but that this connection will happen soon. Musk has described the eventual vision plainly. Someone who has lost the use of their arms or legs receiving Optimus limbs, with motor commands that once controlled their biological limbs, instead controlling robotic ones. Cybernetic limbs as an actual medical product. Consider what Tesla brings to this equation. Optimus production is scheduled to begin at the Fremont factory this summer, on production lines that once built the Model S and Model X, meaning hands, arms, and actuators manufactured at genuine industrial scale. If an Optimus hand becomes capable enough to perform factory work, it's likely also capable enough to restore functional grip for a paralyzed patient. That represents a medical market Tesla could enter using hardware it's already manufacturing at scale for entirely different purposes. None of this shows up in Tesla's financials this quarter. This is realistically a 5 to 10-year development thread, possibly longer. But the Dura breakthrough just made that entire thread meaningfully safer and more repeatable, which is generally how long-term technological threads eventually become actual products, one unglamorous incremental step at a time. The Boring Company, the most underrated piece. Then there's the Boring Company, arguably the most overlooked part of this entire picture. The Vegas Loop began in 2021 as a modest demonstration beneath a convention center. 3 stations, and considerable public skepticism. 5 years later, it has quietly transported over 3 million passengers across 11 stations. An airport connection has begun operating, a second tunnel crossing beneath the strip is complete, and a newer segment is engineered for 60 miles per hour, up from 35 in earlier tunnel sections. The vehicle fleet has grown to 160 Teslas as new phases open, and a university station recently cleared its approval process. The detail that matters most for the broader Tesla thesis, these vehicles are already driving themselves. The Boring Company is running Tesla's full self-driving software across the Loop fleet, currently with a safety driver still present. Musk previously suggested the safety driver would be removed within a month or 2, a timeline that has since slipped, as his timelines often do, but supervised autonomous miles continue accumulating daily with paying passengers already in the vehicles. Consider what a tunnel actually represents for an autonomous vehicle, a fully controlled environment with no weather, no pedestrians, no cross-traffic, and no unpredictable turns. It's about as easy a deployment environment as autonomous driving will ever encounter, and the Boring Company already owns miles of exactly that environment. With paying customers already using it, Tesla gets to accumulate genuine autonomous driving miles in a sealed setting while the broader public robotaxi rollout works through permitting and political hurdles. On that note, the above-ground story has become real too. Tesla filed for a Nevada robotaxi permit on June 5th, covering Clark County with up to 5,000 vehicles authorized in the first year, explicitly including airport service in the application. Gold-colored robotaxi vehicles have already been spotted around the city, and Tesla has built out a dedicated depot complete with superchargers and vehicle lifts. The permit remains under review, so passenger rides haven't started yet. But nobody builds a full operational depot for a service they don't intend to run. Meanwhile, the Boring Company itself is scaling rapidly, currently tunneling in 3 cities simultaneously. Las Vegas, a project in Nashville where a new tunnel boring machine just finished commissioning, and a project in Bastrop, Texas. The current Vegas plan calls for 104 stations across 68 miles of tunnel, and the local tourism authority has signed a $25 million 5-year operating agreement with the Boring Company. Every station that opens represents guaranteed demand for Tesla vehicles, and eventually for purpose-built vehicles like Robovan and Cybercab, designed specifically for fixed-route, high-frequency transit. It's also worth noting that competitors like Waymo simply cannot follow Tesla into these tunnels, since the infrastructure itself functions as a physical moat. Putting the three pieces together. Line these three threads up side by side, and a clear shape emerges. X money represents the financial layer, deposits, payments, and payouts running through a single rail. Neuralink represents the interface layer, brains communicating directly with machines, a connection that just became meaningfully easier to scale. The Boring Company represents the physical infrastructure layer, dedicated tunnels where Tesla's software is already doing the driving. Tesla sits at the center of all three, since Tesla manufactures the actual hardware, the vehicles operating in the tunnels, the robots that could eventually carry Neuralink's motor signals, and the fleet that would ultimately run on this shared payment infrastructure. SpaceX benefits from the same underlying rail through Starlink's billing infrastructure, and much further out through potential banking access anywhere its satellite network reaches. One important structural caveat before this goes too far: X, Neuralink, and the Boring Company are all separate private companies. Value flows to Tesla specifically through actual formal deals, real integrations, and shared engineering resources, not through vague association. Right now, the connective tissue linking these companies is mostly Musk himself, plus a handful of public hints. That's considerably thinner than dramatic framing might suggest, but the overall direction does appear to be one unified system, and June 2026 is the month 3 of its components became publicly real. The honest case against all of this. This narrative deserves genuine scrutiny, and there are 4 significant concerns worth taking seriously. First, that 6% rate is almost certainly a temporary customer acquisition tool that will decline over time, since the banking partners involved aren't operating a charity, and the subsidy has to end eventually. The counter-argument is that these introductory rates exist specifically to capture deposits, and deposits tend to be sticky once captured. Ask anyone who's tried switching banks after setting up 6 different automatic payments. Second, regulatory scrutiny is real and already underway. A Senate inquiry was sent regarding X money back in April, before the wider rollout even launched, and X still lacks money transmitter licenses in several states. Financial services represent by far the most heavily regulated product Musk has ever launched, more regulated than rockets. This is an area where progress can stall in ways engineering alone cannot fix. Third, and this is the central issue, none of the actual Tesla or SpaceX integrations exist yet in any concrete form. The Robotaxi app currently uses Apple Pay, and X Money cannot currently pay for a supercharger session. Everything connecting these companies in this analysis is speculative setup, and speculative setups can remain unconnected for years. These are legally separate companies with separate boards and separate shareholders, and any formal deal between them will face significant legal scrutiny precisely because of overlapping ownership. Fourth, Neuralink's current scale remains modest. 21 patients constitutes a clinical trial, and high-volume production remains a stated target from someone whose timelines routinely slip. The through-dura surgical result is genuine and independently documented with surgical footage, but the path from 21 implants to meaningful production volume runs directly through FDA approval processes that have never been rushed for anyone's convenience. Where does that leave things? Every individual timeline here could realistically slip, and the overall direction still appears to hold regardless. The deposits are genuinely real. The autonomous tunnel miles are genuinely real. The sealed dura surgical breakthrough is genuinely real. The timelines represent the speculative part of this story. The underlying construction is the solid part, and that construction is actively happening. What this actually means for Tesla stock. So what should a Tesla shareholder actually do with this information? This narrative touches the stock through 3 distinct channels, and it's worth keeping them mentally separate. The nearest term channel involves robotaxi unit economics, specifically payment processing costs and per-ride margins. If X money eventually integrates into robotaxi payments, that shows up directly in modelable gross margin calculations. The middle-term channel involves Optimus, where Neuralink's progress continually raises the ceiling on what the robot could eventually be used for and who might purchase it. The longer-term channel involves a broader network premium, the market gradually beginning to price Tesla as the hardware manufacturing arm of Musk's entire ecosystem of companies. None of this generates revenue this quarter, and trading on any single headline from this specific month would likely be a mistake in either direction. The more useful approach is watching for actual connection points, since a genuine connection is the exact moment private company progress converts into actual Tesla revenue. Everything before that moment remains narrative, everything after it becomes measurable numbers. A reasonable base case, purely as opinion, is that some visible integration appears within the next 12 months, likely something modest and payments related initially. Modest is fine here. Tesla's first supercharger was just a handful of charging stalls in a single parking lot. 5 specific things worth watching going forward. First, the Robotaxi app's payment screen. The day X Money appears alongside Apple Pay as an option, speculation becomes documented strategy. Second, how long X Money's 6% rate and 3% cashback actually hold. A quick reduction suggests deposits came easily, while holding the rate past a year suggests the company is fighting hard for every dollar. Third, Neuralink's patient count alongside FDA movement on automated surgical procedures. The jump from 21 patients toward roughly 100 would represent a genuine scaling signal, made considerably easier by the through-door breakthrough. Fourth, developments in Las Vegas specifically. Watch the Nevada Transportation Authority, since Tesla's 5,000 vehicle permit application currently sits with them, and watch for the actual removal of the safety driver from the tunnel loop. Fifth, Optimus production actually beginning at Fremont this summer, which would make every Neuralink Optimus scenario considerably more tangible and would be easily verifiable through video evidence. Zooming out, for roughly 2 decades, these companies were covered as entirely separate ventures: a car company, a rocket company, a tunnel company, a brain-computer interface company, and a social media platform. June 2026 was the month the underlying connections between them started becoming publicly visible: money, mining infrastructure, machines, and tunnels. Tesla builds the physical half of that emerging system, and it happens to be the one piece of this entire ecosystem that ordinary investors can actually own shares in.